Hello everyone and welcome back. So tonight we're going to set up the Scolopendra Heros enclosure. This is for a peedling, so again we're going to be using those small ventilation holes, but we need lots of them. Scolopendra Heros is a centipede that is very susceptible to mycosis infections, so you need high ventilation in very dry conditions. We got quite a bit of stuff for this setup. This particular specimen was collected in Santa Rosa, New Mexico. So it's the Scolopendra Heros Castaniceps, as they used to call it. So these are pretty beautiful specimens. I really like them. They can get very large, up to 10 inches. I don't know of anything larger. People do claim 12 inches, but I really doubt that. Anyways, let's get started with this video. First of all, we're going to go ahead and go over the substrate we're going to be using. Now, as I mentioned before, Heros needs a dry enclosure. You don't want it to be too humid, but then again, you also don't want it to not have any water. So, my preferred substrate mixture for Scolopendra Heros is going to be roughly 90 to 95% sand and about 5% peat right here. Now I also have here some gravel. Now this is a pretty fine, smaller gravel, but mixed into this gravel, as you can see, is some larger chunks of peat. Now what I've done is sifted peat to get bigger chunks out. This is going to help retain needed moisture in the gravel. This is going to allow for the centipede to not completely dry out, but it won't get way too humid in the enclosure either. You're not going to want to keep a lot of the substrate wet. This is where you're going to want your humidity, is mixed in the gravel and with that sphagnum, or peat rather, that I explained was mixed in there. So let's go ahead and start getting these two mixed. We're not going to mix this just yet. This is going to be a separate layer on the ground here. It's not going to be part of this. So let's go ahead and do that. Alright, now I got it mixed, and I've very lightly moistened it. Now, not really enough to notice. It still feels dry. I moistened it mainly to have it retain a little bit of that moisture in the mixed in peat. It will help keep the enclosure not so dry that the centipede's going to, dry out and die, but it's also not going to allow stuff like mycosis to form. So, let's start getting this enclosure put together. So, as always, we have our sealing lid with the locks on them. As we all know, centipedes are escape artists. Now this is a peedling. It's very small. We don't want it getting through air holes, but it does need very high ventilation. So we've done about 1 million little air holes all the way across the sides. I like to keep my air holes down near ground level. Some people put air holes up top, and you're not really doing anything for the ventilation when it's way up here. It's just as bad as having it on the top only. So make sure you get your air holes down near ground level. And lots of them for Heros. Lots and lots of air holes, because you want super high ventilation. Now, we're going to start putting it together. Now, Heros is mainly going to have rocks for debris, but that's not going to come yet. Let's just start getting the substrate in here. Now we got our base layer, our sand peat mix. And so, as you can see right here, we've made a slight incline. That's because we're going to put the gravel right in here, and it's going to be slightly higher than the rest of the terrain. So now I'm going to add the gravel. Now we've added the gravel. So right here the gravel goes a little higher. It meets even with the air holes. Now I find Heros like to rest on rocky areas. They don't appear to like the sand and substrate like that as much. They will go to a drier rocky area if it is available to them. So we're going to supply them with a decent bit of rocks in the enclosure so they have access to what they like to lay on. And there we go. Now that we've provided it with adequate rock and substrate cover, it should be rather comfortable. Now one last step to add a bit more enrichment is going to be some substrate from the area we collected from. Now this is just going to be some various, foliage that has fallen and dried out, and we're going to add this to part of the enclosure. Now this particular one was collected at a lakefront, and so that's what we're kind of simulating here. We're going to have a sandy area, and then the highland area is going to be your rocks, and this area right here. So let's go ahead and add this little last bit in, and then we can put the centipede in and see how he likes his enclosure. And there you have it, our completed Scolopendra Heros enclosure. So now let's go ahead and get him and see what he thinks about it. This one's a little rough to work with. He is way too fast, so we're just going to go ahead and let him go on his own. There we go. And that is exactly why I provided that rock. So we'll let him explore his new enclosure, and we'll put him somewhere nice and warm. These guys, I like to keep them very warm, between 85 and 90 degrees. Give them lots of food. Provide them with water daily. What I like to do is put just a little bottle cap with water somewhere in the corner, because you're not going to want to be misting this enclosure too much. You're going to mist just this area, like I said, and not very often. If you're seeing a ton of condensation around the sides of the enclosure, then you have too much humidity and not high enough ventilation. If you just see condensation right on this side where the rocks are, you're doing it right. Again, keep this side dry. But yeah, so I'll let you guys go for tonight. I hope you enjoyed this video, found it informative. Like, subscribe, share this everywhere you can, and we'll see you next time here at Mike's House of 1,000 Legs.